The Nile begins where a waterfall no longer exists. From Uganda's equatorial lake, clear water gathers above drowned rock and starts a journey toward deserts 4,000 miles away. Here, forests shelter gorillas, glaciers cling to the equator, and ancient kingdoms endure beneath the weight of histories imposed from outside. Yet what moves me most is how people, animals, and traditions survive not through grandeur, but through small, stubborn acts of endurance. But beneath the famous sign at Jinja lies a deeper question. Who truly decides where a river and a country's story begins? To follow that question is to enter Uganda through vanished falls, living kingdoms, retreating ice, and water that never fully belonged to itself. Uganda does not reveal itself through one landscape, but through countless worlds pressed together beneath the same equatorial sky. Water leaves immense lakes, crosses papyrus wetlands, breaks through stone, and continues north toward countries far beyond Uganda's borders. Between those waterways rise ancient forests, dry cattle plains, crowded hills, volcanic highlands, and ice clinging unexpectedly above tropical valleys. Yet the country's deeper character lives in its people, whose communities have carried kingdoms, languages, beliefs, and survival knowledge across generations. What moves me most is the quiet persistence found here, from farmers shaping steep hillsides to families rebuilding lives beside changing rivers. Beauty and hardship rarely stand apart in Uganda. They share the same forests, roads, villages, and waters that sustain daily life. Every region seems to challenge an easy explanation, hiding a second story beneath the first impression offered by the landscape. To understand Uganda, we must begin not with a map, but with the powerful environments that continue shaping everything living within them. Windy rises in layered ridges where cloud, rain, and tangled vegetation repeatedly erase the boundary between earth and sky. Seen from above, the forest resembles a dark green sea folded tightly across the mountains of southwestern Uganda. Beneath the canopy, roots cross narrow trails while vines descend from trees that have occupied these slopes for thousands of years. UNESCO records more than 160 tree species and over 100 fern species within this remarkably concentrated biological refuge. The name Bwindi is often associated with darkness, an impression that becomes understandable when daylight struggles through the crowded leaves. What stays with the viewer is not simply its beauty, but the feeling that the forest controls how slowly it will be understood. Every hidden ravine seems to protect another life, another memory, and another reason this landscape has resisted complete human possession. At Murchison Falls, the Nile suddenly loses the calm appearance it carried across the open country upstream. The river is driven through a narrow rock passage before falling into a gorge filled with spray, turbulence, and continuous thunder. The violence is concentrated within a small space, making the surrounding savanna appear almost unnaturally still by comparison. Beyond the gorge, the water relaxes again, widening toward floodplains where palms, woodland, and grasslands support abundant wildlife. Uganda Wildlife Authority lists hundreds of bird species and more than 100 mammal species across this diverse protected landscape. The falls have also been called Kabalega Falls, recalling the Bunyoro ruler remembered for resisting British colonial expansion. That older name gives the scenery a second force, because even the waterfall carries a history of resistance and contested memory. Few contrasts feel more powerful than watching the same river create destruction, refuge, movement, and life within only a few kilometers. The Rwenzori Mountains climb from equatorial forest toward bare rock, alpine wetlands, snowfields, and glaciers suspended above tropical valleys. Margarita Peak reaches 5,109 meters, making it Africa's third highest summit and one of the continent's strangest climatic frontiers. The white ice feels especially moving here, because every distant glimmer appears both ancient and increasingly temporary. Lake Bunyonyi lies between steep cultivated hills, its surface divided by islands that emerge gradually through the morning mist. The name is widely interpreted as the place of many little birds, whose calls travel easily across the sheltered water. Wooden canoes still connect homes, farms, schools, markets, and accommodations scattered along the shores and islands. From a high viewpoint, the lake appears peaceful enough to silence every thought beyond the next ridge. Yet local accounts attach a painful history to Akampene, a small island often known as Punishment Island. Oral stories describe unmarried pregnant girls being abandoned there under social customs that judge them more harshly than the men involved. Whether every detail can be historically verified, the story continues because communities remember the unequal suffering behind the calm scenery. That knowledge changes the emotional color of the lake, making its stillness feel reflective rather than merely picturesque. Bunyonyi becomes unforgettable precisely because beauty and difficult memory remain visible within the same quiet frame. Near Moroto, much of Uganda's familiar green gives way to red soil, thorn trees, seasonal rivers, and immense open horizons. Isolated mountains rise abruptly from the plains, appearing like stone islands left behind by an ancient retreating sea. Rainfall can be uncertain, so movement, grazing knowledge, and access to water remain central to life across the region. The plains may look empty from a distance, yet pathways record generations of herders moving between settlements and cattle camps. Mount Moroto is an ancient volcanic mountain whose name is associated with the idea of a westward mountain. Local tradition remembers it as a landmark encountered by Karamojong ancestors as they entered and settled this northeastern territory. That story makes the mountain feel less like background scenery and more like a compass preserved in collective memory. There is deep admiration in seeing communities red, grass, clouds, livestock behavior, and soil as parts of one survival system. Karamoja's grandeur comes from openness, but its emotional strength comes from people who have learned to live without predictable abundance. Lake Albert occupies the floor of the Western Rift, beneath escarpments and distant mountains rising across the Congolese frontier. The Nile enters from the south, spreads across the lake, then gathers again before continuing towards South Sudan. Fishing settlements remain closely tied to changing winds, water levels, catches, and the fragile economy of each returning boat. The lake appears almost limitless, yet the smallest canoe reveals how directly human survival depends upon its changing surface. Below Murchison Falls, Nile crocodiles wait where disoriented fish are carried from the violent white water into slower currents. Their stillness looks almost geological, until a movement reveals how carefully every muscle has been held in readiness. Large individuals may grow beyond 5 meters, carrying a body plan refined across millions of years of environmental change. They can remain submerged for long periods, reducing movement while watching vibrations pass through the water above them. Yet their most unexpected behavior appears not during hunting, but when eggs begin calling beneath the riverbank sand. Females may uncover their hatchlings and transport them gently toward the water inside jaws powerful enough to break bone. That contradiction leaves a strong impression. The river's most feared mouth can also become protection for newly emerged life. Crocodiles make the Nile feel ancient, not because they belong to history, but because they remain perfectly present within it. A mountain gorilla may remain completely hidden in Bwindi even when branches are moving only a short distance from the trail. Then a hand reaches through the leaves, and the forest suddenly feels occupied by an intelligence that had been observing first. Roughly half of the world's surviving mountain gorillas live within Bwindi's montane forest, according to Uganda Wildlife Authority. Their family groups may include females, infants, juveniles, and a dominant silverback responsible for movement, protection, and social order. The silver color develops across the back of an adult male, creating a visible sign of maturity rather than a separate species. Despite their strength, mountain gorillas spend much of the day feeding slowly on leaves, stems, bark, fruit, and soft vegetation. Young animals interrupt this calm with climbing, rolling, chasing, and sudden games that seem instantly recognizable to human observers. The resemblance becomes especially affecting when a mother adjusts an infant against her body with deliberate gentleness. Yet closeness carries risk, because human respiratory infections can threaten populations already limited to a small geographic range. Encounters are therefore controlled through permits, time limits, ranger guidance, and rules designed to reduce stress and disease transmission. What moves the narrator most is not their similarity to us, but the dignity of a society requiring no human approval. Leaving the group quietly feels like accepting a necessary truth. The most meaningful encounter is one that changes nothing for them. Uganda's lions occupy protected savannas where a single lifted head may reveal a pride previously hidden within the tall grass. Lionesses usually perform much of the coordinated hunting, while the group protects territory, cubs, and access to reliable prey. Even when resting, their presence changes the behavior of antelope, buffalo, and every smaller animal watching the open ground. Recent wildlife assessments show that Uganda's lion population remains vulnerable, particularly where habitat and livestock areas meet. Seeing one move freely creates admiration, but also discomfort, because that freedom now survives inside increasingly defended boundaries. Elephants cross Uganda's savannas and forests with a quietness that seems impossible for animals carrying such enormous physical weight. Family groups are commonly guided by older females whose memory helps locate water, food, and safer seasonal routes. Calves remain close to adults, learning through touch, imitation, low-frequency communication, and repeated movement across familiar ground. Uganda's monitored elephant populations remain significant, although recent official figures show declines within several protected landscapes. Restricted habitat can also push elephants toward farmland, creating losses for communities and dangerous encounters for both people and wildlife. There is particular dignity in watching an entire herd slow down for its smallest member, rather than leaving it behind. The emotion elephants inspire should therefore lead beyond admiration toward a harder question. How much space are humans prepared to share? Uganda's identity becomes clearest not only in national parks, but along village paths, family courtyards, farms, workshops, and roadside markets. Mornings often begin with sweeping compounds, preparing food, collecting water, tending animals, and organizing work before the heat strengthens. Bicycles and motorcycles carry bananas, sacks of grain, charcoal, tools, school children, livestock, and sometimes several generations at once. Agriculture shapes daily life through matoke gardens, coffee plots, cassava, maize, beans, millet, groundnuts, and small family herds. On steep hillsides, every planted strip represents patient labor against erosion, heavy rain, and the limited space available for cultivation. That effort deserves more attention than romantic images of rural simplicity, because green scenery does not make physical work lighter. Meals bring relatives together around matoke, posho, millet bread, vegetables, groundnut sauces, beans, fish, or meat when available. Food becomes a language of welcome, especially when a portion is offered before a visitor has found words to ask. Uganda contains more than 50 ethnic communities, each carrying distinct histories, social structures, languages, ceremonies, and regional identities. Luganda is widely spoken in the central region, while many other languages organize life across western, eastern, and northern communities. Music preserves praise, courtship, humor, warning, grief, spiritual meaning, and histories that were rarely recorded in written archives. Drums may announce ceremonies, accompany dance, coordinate performance, or mark transitions within family and communal life. Clothing also communicates identity through fabric, beadwork, color, religious practice, profession, age, celebration, and personal preference. Traditional knowledge often survives through elders who preserve genealogy, agricultural memory, medicinal plants, stories, and customary methods of resolving conflict. Young people, meanwhile, connect villages with phones, education, boda-bodas, urban work, digital business, and migration between regions. The result is not a culture waiting unchanged for tourists, but one constantly negotiating continuity and transformation. What feels most personal is the ease with which ordinary conversation can begin beside a kiosk, garden, school, or cooking fire. Such warmth should never be treated as an attraction, because hospitality is generosity offered by people facing pressures of their own. The deepest respect comes from recognizing that every peaceful village contains ambition, disagreement, fatigue, memory, and difficult choices. Long after dramatic scenery fades, These unplanned human details often become the part of Uganda remembered with the greatest affection. Traditional homes in Uganda differ according to climate, available materials, family organization, livestock needs, and the customs of each community. Round earthen houses with steep grass roofs remain among the most recognizable forms within several rural regions. Thick walls help moderate heat, while carefully layered thatch carries heavy rain away from the interior living space. Construction can involve shared knowledge of timber selection, mud preparation, roof binding, drainage, repair, and seasonal timing. In Karamoja, many attas use circular layouts and protective fencing to shelter extended families, food stores, and cattle. These homes may look modest, but every material choice answers a practical challenge refined through repeated experience. Their beauty comes from intelligence rather than decoration. Architecture shaped directly by the weather, animals, labor, and land surrounding it. Part 5. Living Traditions and Culture. Kampala rises and falls across numerous hills, where modern construction, dense neighborhoods, markets, religious landmarks, and royal history occupy the same horizon. Boda-bodas flow between cars while vendors, office workers, students, mechanics, and traders move through a city rarely permitted to stand still. In crowded markets, fruit, clothing, electronics, tools, poultry, spare parts, and household goods fill passages beneath sheets of corrugated roofing. Street kitchens prepare the Rolex, combining an omelette and chapati into one of Uganda's most recognizable urban meals. Beneath this modern rhythm lies the older political world of Buganda, whose institutions existed long before colonial administration reached the region. The Kabaka remains an important cultural figure, while clan identities, ceremonies, language, and royal sites continue shaping central Uganda. At Kasubi, the royal tombs preserve the memory of Buganda kings through ritual space, bark cloth, grass architecture, and inherited responsibilities. Fire destroyed the main tomb building in 2010, causing a cultural wound far greater than the loss of an ordinary structure. Reconstruction required specialist materials and knowledge that could not be replaced by concrete, machinery, or standard architectural plans. Craftspeople returned to techniques of thatching, binding, timber work, and bark cloth preparation transmitted across generations. That recovery is deeply moving, because the monument was rebuilt not only with materials, but with remembered movements of the hand. Kampala therefore carries two powerful speeds, a capital pressing forward and a kingdom insisting that memory must travel with it. The city feels most alive where those forces meet, in markets, royal roads, ceremonies, traffic, food, technology, and daily conversation. Beneath the rock shelters of Nile, red and pale geometric paintings remain from communities whose identities cannot be recovered with certainty. Concentric circles, lines, and abstract forms invite explanations, but no interpretation has closed the distance between modern viewers and their creators. Regional traditions have connected the shelters with sacred activity, fertility, rainmaking, and the presence of earlier inhabitants. These associations should not be mistaken for a final archaeological answer, yet they reveal how later communities continued relating to the site. What creates the strongest emotion is the silence surrounding the artists, whose symbols survived while their names and language disappeared. Nyero offers no completed legend. It leaves a more haunting inheritance, the realization that history can endure without explaining itself. Within Uganda, the Nile changes repeatedly, becoming clear outflow, papyrus channel, shallow lake, rapid, waterfall, gorge, and broad, slow river. It leaves Lake Victoria, crosses Lake Kyoga, turns west through Murchison Falls, and enters Lake Albert before continuing northward. Each transformation supports different settlements, fisheries, habitats, transport routes, spiritual traditions, and forms of economic activity. Fishing families learn currents, seasonal winds, bird movements, and water levels through attention shaped by necessity rather than theory. Hydropower stations use the river's descent to supply electricity for homes, businesses, schools, hospitals, and expanding urban areas. Yet reservoirs also cover rapids, habitats, sacred spaces, and memories that cannot be reconstructed somewhere else. The Nile therefore carries progress and loss together, resisting every attempt to describe development as a simple victory. It is stirring to imagine water leaving Uganda before nourishing farms and cities thousands of kilometers farther north. That connection also raises an uncomfortable question. When one river sustains many nations, who is entitled to decide its future? At Jinja, the northern edge of Lake Victoria narrows into moving water and begins the most recognizable Ugandan section of the White Nile. The outflow appears unexpectedly clear, because the lake has already allowed much suspended sediment to settle beneath its vast surface. Fishing boats and river traffic move across a place carrying geographic importance far greater than its calm first appearance suggests. European exploration made Jinja famous through the search for a single, definitive source of the Nile. John Hanning Speke reached the outflow during the 19th century and believed the ancient geographic question had finally been answered. Yet Lake Victoria receives rivers from several countries, alongside enormous volumes of rain falling directly onto the lake itself. The answer therefore changes according to whether the beginning means the lake outlet, longest tributary, farthest spring, rainfall, or mountain ice. Rather than weakening Jinja's importance, that uncertainty makes the city the center of a much more interesting argument. It reveals how geographic beginnings often depend upon the measurement chosen and the authority permitted to name them. Ripon Falls once crossed the natural outflow, forming the cascade associated with Speke's historic claim. During the 20th century, construction of the Owen Falls Dam raised the water and submerged the natural waterfall. The landmark did not gradually erode or move downstream. It vanished beneath a reservoir created to generate power. Knowing that the falls remain underwater gives the peaceful surface an unsettling depth, as though part of the landscape has been archived. The dam later became known as Nalubale, recalling an older local name for Lake Victoria, connected with spiritual meaning. That renaming returned a Ugandan layer of memory to infrastructure originally created under colonial authority. Farther downstream, additional dams have supplied electricity while covering rapids associated with recreation and Busoga spiritual practice. Jinja today combines industry, tourism, fishing, rafting, religious meaning, riverside communities, and the practical demands of urban growth. Visitors may arrive seeking the famous source marker, but the richest story begins where that simple sign stops explaining. What lingers is the realization that a river's beginning can be named, disputed, engineered, flooded, and politically controlled. From Jinja, the Nile travels north carrying not only water, but Uganda's geography, memory, sacrifice, and unresolved questions. Kibale protects tall tropical forest, known for an exceptional concentration of primates, including chimpanzees and 12 other recorded primate species. Calls can pass through the canopy long before branches reveal where a chimpanzee group is moving. Chimpanzees cooperate, groom, compete, care for young, defend territory, use social alliances, and sometimes hunt smaller monkeys. Uganda Wildlife Authority estimates that Kibale supports more than 1,500 chimpanzees distributed among several communities. What lingers emotionally is the awareness of another intelligence navigating the forest through knowledge different from our own. Kibale makes observation feel reciprocal, because the watcher eventually realizes that eyes above may have been following every movement below. Kampala begins each morning in movement as shops open, buses fill, motorcycles gather, and traders arrange goods beside crowded roads. The hills separate neighborhoods visually, while traffic connects them through an unpredictable network of daily journeys. Markets compress bargaining, carrying, cooking, repairing, loading, and selling into narrow spaces, filled with noise and fragmented light. Offices and shopping centers rise near workshops, street stalls, mosques, churches, royal sites, and densely inhabited valleys. Boda-bodas provide essential speed, although their usefulness remains inseparable from the risks of navigating congested streets. The city can feel exhausting, but its energy reveals a remarkable confidence in improvisation and enterprise. Kampala gathers languages, ambitions, inequalities, faiths, regional identities, and generations into the same restless urban system. Its beauty appears gradually, not through perfect order, but through the human intelligence that keeps apparent disorder functioning. Around Lake Bunyonyi, settlements follow steep slopes where narrow terraces are maintained carefully above the water. Canoes provide practical connections between islands, homes, schools, markets, gardens, lodges, and shoreline communities. Morning mist temporarily separates the islands, making them appear like independent worlds suspended across the lake. Then paddles emerge, voices travel, and daily movement reveals how closely every shore depends upon the others. Community visits can introduce farming, craft work, oral history, bird life, and the practical knowledge required for island living. Yet the remembered story of a campane prevents the lake from becoming only a peaceful closing image. Bunyonyi holds tenderness and severity together, showing how beautiful landscapes can preserve painful moral histories. Its final impression is calm, but not empty, because every island appears to carry a different human truth. Part 11. Travel tips, costs, and visa guide. Uganda can be visited throughout the year, although drier periods generally make wildlife viewing, road travel, and forest trekking easier. June through August and December through February are commonly preferred, while wetter months bring greener scenery and more difficult trails. Mountain and forest weather can change quickly, so rain protection remains useful even during the comparatively dry seasons. Travelers who require a Ugandan visa should apply through the country's official electronic visa system before beginning their journey. Passport requirements vary by nationality, but travelers are generally advised to have at least 6 months of validity remaining. Uganda currently requires proof of yellow fever vaccination, and the physical certificate may be requested during immigration procedures. The East African tourist visa costs $100 and covers eligible travel through Uganda, Kenya, and Rwanda for 90 days. Accommodation ranges from basic guest houses and camps to high-end safari lodges, making total costs heavily dependent on comfort and itinerary. Gorilla and chimpanzee permits form a major expense, so availability and current Uganda Wildlife Authority tariffs should be checked before booking. For April, May, and November 2026, UWA introduced discounted foreign non-resident rates of $600 for gorilla tracking. Kampala and Jinja are accessible by paved roads, but remote parks and mountain areas may require four-wheel drive vehicles and experienced local drivers. Comprehensive insurance should cover medical emergencies, evacuation, trekking, rafting, and any wildlife activities included in the itinerary. Current health conditions, border changes, regional warnings, and park regulations should always be reviewed shortly before departure. Wildlife distances, ranger instructions, photography restrictions, and community boundaries should be respected even when a closer image appears tempting. Cultural visits are most meaningful when local residents control the experience and receive a clear share of the income. Uganda offers extraordinary access to nature and community life, but the finest journey is one that leaves dignity undisturbed. Even after the road ends, Uganda's rivers, forests, and village fires continue moving quietly through the mind. The Nile carries water northward, but it also carries stories of drowned falls, guarded kingdoms, and lives rebuilt beside changing shores. What makes this country unforgettable is not one landscape, but the way beauty and hardship remain inseparable within it. A gorilla family vanishes into Bwindi, A canoe crosses Bunyonyi, and a herder reads tomorrow in Karamoja's sky. Those images leave a tender ache, because everything enduring here survives through memory, restraint, labor, and choices still being made. Uganda does not ask to be remembered as the source of something else, but as a living world with its own beginning.